My name is Gary Thomas Keating, and I use my middle name to honor my grandfather, who was a performer as I am. We're sitting in front of City Hall, as you probably know, but the only part of it that's original to the building is the tower right out front. It was a much smaller building up until 1920s. Across from the fountain, across from City Hall, is the Robert Frost Fountain. That's where Frost, when he graduated from high school across the street with his future wife, they went across the street and had tea and cookies and lemonade and cookies with their guests after the graduation. We're coming past a common that's extraordinary, because the founders of the city could have sold this for big profits, but they laid aside 17.5 acres of open space, and it's deeded to the people of the city of Lawrence as an irrevocable deed of trust. This was the first church in Lawrence, an Anglican church. This wasn't the first building, but this is the Grace Episcopal Church. It was around the corner originally. The stone that built this sanctuary is from the same quarry that the stone came from for the Great Stone Dam, and some leftovers. This is Garden Street, and it used to go all the way up the hill as the street called Garden, because there were many gardens here. Right there is the Masonic Temple, I should say more. To your left here is, it used to be the parsonage for the Episcopal Church. And for those of you who are old enough, you might remember Governor Chuck Peabody. His father was the rector of Grace Episcopal Church, and Governor Peabody was born in that house. Most of these houses are Greek revivals, but starting here, there were 3-deckers. I live in that 3-decker-like building right there. At the front, it's Victorian. But there were 4 3-deckers jammed into that parking lot. That was built before 1911 and 12, when the first zoning laws came into effect. And that affected the workers' conditions and how they lived at home. We're now going to approach what is called the mechanics blocks on the left. The English, when they first came here, they were working as skilled laborers, building the machinery to weave the cotton and the wool, and they had to be promised, and they also built locomotives and train cars just down past here, and they had to be promised that they would have houses to live in that was just like home. Well, most of them came from Manchester, England, where parts of my family come from, a little village outside called Ashton-under-Lyne. And so they literally, the builders of the city literally stole architectural plans from Manchester, England, and here you have the mechanics blocks. Some people have modernized them by taking the plaster off the walls, but you couldn't have asked a 19th century man and woman to live in conditions like that. If you showed them a house that had brick walls inside, they'd be insulted. They wanted plaster, they could paint or put up wallpaper. From what we know, this was the very first duplex that was built to try to figure out good ways to build it. The back of it is a modernization, but it's very well done. Now we're coming up, used to be Garden, it's now changing to Gender Street. An extraordinary story of the gratitude people had for their wealth in the time. The family that owned Russell Paper, which was up the top of this hill, gave their home, which was on this side, to be the first general hospital in 1875. And many workers took advantage of that, and there was no health insurance, of course, at the time. Or I shouldn't say, of course, you might not have known that. But now this is our general hospital. Off to the right is the original mill. That was a stone mill, where everything else is built with brick. That stone is called rubble stone, and it's literally the stone that was left over from when they dug the canals. And the canals were mostly dug by Irishmen who did not live in those houses, there was a great deal of prejudice. They did not live in those houses. They lived in Shantytown. We'll see where it was, in South Lawrence.
The Essex Company really doesn't operate mills. They were awarded exclusive water rights to the Merrimack River. So they become a power company. Now many of the stockholders and board of directors of the Essex Company also own mills individually, but not the Essex Company. The Essex Company bought that, and the big building you can see, the big building behind it, is the Everett Mill. The Everett Mill is the second biggest mill in Lawrence. It's not the biggest, and it's a huge, huge mill. But you can see the Lawrence Machine Shop, 1860.
Is that top round window that shows the globe, is that a newer window?
No,
Is that one of the originals?
I believe it is.
This is the Lawrence General Hospital, and I hope I don't embarrass. Oh no, he wasn't. My twin and I were born here. I have a maternal twin. My mother was born here, and my grandfather was rushed here after he was born at home. The original building, the original estate house is gone.
We're approaching the top of Prospect Hill, and on the top of Prospect Hill right here is the Storrow Park. Storrow Park was named after Charles Storrow of Storrow Drive fame in Boston. There's Charles Storrow here, Storrow Park, Storrow Street, Storrow School, Storrow's residence was right there. This is Prospect Hill because the word is that the owners of the stockholders of the Essex Company went up to this hill and prospected the future of the city from that point of view.
As we turn the corner here on Marston Street, we're going to be at the top of Canal Street, which they weren't real inventive with naming streets always. It's named after it runs along the main canal. And they're doing extensive work with a new bridge and clearing open space. There's a paper mill, and it was a major brownfield site, which meant it was so contaminated. Anyone living there could get cancer. They say in 15 minutes. I think that's a little exaggeration, to say the least.
This street was owned by the mills. And so the city never maintained it. Until now it's been taken over. This is the new gateway to the city. We just crossed over the Spiggle River.
This is where the canal empties out. There's an artificial waterfall there, and the water from this canal dumps into one of our three rivers. Lawrence is extraordinary, has three rivers that form the peace sign. We have on this side the spigot that flows from the Arlington district of Lawrence. On the other side, we have the Shawshene River that flows from around Concord, Massachusetts. And then we have the mighty Merrimack, which goes from Franklin, New Hampshire, down to the ocean at Newburyport and Salisbury. This main canal, and we'll see a little further up a power canal, this is almost exactly a mile long. And this is called the North Canal. And the reason they built the canal is they would hold the water back behind the dam, which you're going to see shortly. And in I think it was 1850, when they had the first machines going really well. And the water would float, they'd open up the gates and let water in, and they had what were called sluice gates, tubes that ran that way toward the mills. And in the mills, there was a turbine. They could not turbine and flywheel that connected. They could not store energy yet. They in fact didn't know very much about what was about to happen with electricity. So the water poured in there, and it turned the turbine wheels, and then it all just connected energy-wise, turned leather belts that eventually turned the looms.
This building on the left is the Pemberton Mill. The Pemberton Mill was built in 1850. In 1860, it collapsed. Okay, in 1860, in January, 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
Oh, that's right.
Sound went through the city like wildfire. It was probably 15,000, maybe 20,000 people living and working in Lawrence in 1860. Everybody knew somebody who worked in the Pemberton Mill. So this like unbelievable emotion went through the entire city. And I used to say to my classes, you can't imagine the emotion, but we can after 9/11. After witnessing and experiencing 9/11, we could empathize with the citizens of Lawrence, the workers of Lawrence, whether you worked in the Washington mills or the Pacific mills or the air mills or wherever you worked, you knew someone who worked in that mill. So after the shock of the news that the mill had collapsed, everybody rushed to the site to participate in the rescue process. And we're picking up brick after brick after brick after brick, speaking to people that were trapped below. We're almost there, we're almost there. And people were acting heroically with the adrenaline going. And then all of a sudden, almost instantaneously, the feeling of a hero fell to hopelessness and helplessness because one of the canteens that was filled with kerosene got knocked over, immediately igniting all the oily wastes from the textiles. And people that were following the wreck were just sat back and helpless, couldn't do anything except listen to the cries of the people. 88 people died and burned to death, primarily in the fall of the Pemberton Mill. Abraham Lincoln traveled through Lawrence. I believe he was on a train in Lawrence, and it stopped at the Lawrence train stop, and he wrote a note to his wife, stopping in Lawrence, Massachusetts. This is where the mill collapsed.
This is a bridge that is a modern reproduction of what was there. Railroad cars could go through here. They took the materials that first they brought the raw materials in. These were cotton mills here. And my great-great-uncle, George Ariel, which my mother used to pronounce, he was recruited to be a boss in this Washington Mill complex because he was a skilled boss back in England. Oh, we're going to see a vista. Look to your left. My drive is fabulous. There's the air mill clock tower. That is the largest mill clock tower in the entire world. Nothing bigger. Is that unbelievable?
No.
The face of it is only 6 inches in diameter, smaller than Big Ben. So we don't have to go to London to see the site like that. Now this building right here, the Washington Mills, is unusual in that it was built from concrete. But you can see a few pieces of it have brick. And the reason we believe that that's so is at the end of the mill, you can see this end of the mill is brick. They called it a renovation instead of a demolition and a new build. So they didn't have to pay the same kind of fee.
Pacific Mills. The machinery exists in the Pacific Mill, yep. And in the south side, I don't believe they're used anymore.
Right next to you here on your, most people on your right, that is the American Milling Company's payroll office. We're going to stop here for a second, right? And this is a boarding house. I don't recall where it was before. This is one of only 2, which was, there were over 100 boarding houses on this street and the parallel street, Methuen Street. And people were still living in them in the 50s. Now that Washington Mills, if you look, oh no, we're too far beyond. But here you can see, up here, this is also a concrete building. They were both built about 1910, 1911. Innovative, all these support beams inside are all rebar with concrete. There was a mill, there's a storehouse like this, identical in Lowell, because some of the same men invested in Lowell and Lawrence. So this was very innovative to come in and pour cold concrete into forms and build these mills. And they haven't, that was a mill, this was the storehouse for both created woven fabric, and also for raw goods. You can always tell, this is different. I'll show you a little later on, I think I can show you. These windows have been changed, but you can always tell what was a storehouse or warehouse. Yes, we can go. When the windows are small, because they didn't need as much light, natural light coming in during the day, so they had small windows. So this is a bridge, and the next one are both reproductions of bridges that were there. And this one in particular is important because this is where the militia sprayed fire hose water on the strikers on cold January mornings and nights. And we have some pretty extraordinary action photos of that. This right here was the only shoe factory in Lawrence. This is now the Fenton Judicial Center. But on that site for many years, taking up the whole site, was Joe Gal Shoe Company. This is before we contracted out so much of the work to make shoes overseas, in Oriental countries especially. Now we turn down a street that has an unusual name. It's named after our town, our city, Lawrence. Lawrence was founded in 1845 with no name for 2 years. Then in 1847, the town meeting got together and decided they would name it after the three brothers that were the biggest investors in the company that built Lawrence, and especially the president of the company, Abbott Lawrence. And he was an extraordinary man with a great vision for the future. Yes, he built this place to make money, but he built it also to give opportunity for immigrants who are coming from many countries, first English-speaking countries, and then others. He built it, he and his investors built it to give them opportunities to get away from the old world, where you couldn't rise up in society like his family did. They were English. And his father, the Lawrence brothers, their father was a general in the Revolutionary War, and he and his men from Groton, Mass. Connected up with Lexington and Concord after the battle, just moments after the battle was over. But he stayed with, right this second I can't recall his first name. This is one of the oldest commercial blocks in the city. This was for many years a bank. You can see the extraordinary architecture, curved windows on the side. It's just breathtaking brickwork. These were 3 different department stores along here. And this is our main street, Essex Street. We're not that clever with naming things, as I said. And they named this after and also the name of the company where the investors put the money to develop this place, the Essex Street. Now we're coming, this is 8th Street, and we're coming up to the second of only 2 remaining boarding houses. And this was owned, that one down there was owned by the Washington Mills. This one was owned by the Atlantic Mills. And we're coming now to the Central Bridge, where my grandmother told me she stood on a cold January day and saw Harry Houdini, the magician, lowered over the bridge. First he was tied up and shackled, then put it in the trunk, and then lowered through a hole in the ice under the bridge and did an escape. And I said, how did they do that? And my grandmother looked at me and said, it was magic. The Central Bridge is indeed the center of our city, of the canal. There used to be a railroad train that went across. Down here is where generations, the Atlantic Mills were down here. They were knocked down in the 30s and 40s, so it became an open parking lot. This is where generations of Laurentians have done something very important. Well, some of them have come parking here, but more importantly, they learned to drive. This is called Sampson's parking lot, because the first discount department store we had was Sampson's, right upstairs in that mill, and downstairs, that was called Allen's, or Arlen's, and downstairs was Sampson's.
Is that where S&H Green Stamps was?
No, S&H Green Stamps was over on Lowell Street,
Okay.
with the Redemption Center, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. That building is now an appliance store across from Walgreens. This is also state park land. We've connected. I didn't tell you about the Central Bridge. Back to something modern. That's the site of where, on the other side, where the fire that burnt out the Verizon lines. That's the bridge where it happened. This side, there was no fire, but many homeless men and women lived underneath it, and they've now been sent off to fend for themselves someplace else. This was a warehouse for the Pacific Mills. You can see the small windows. Over my shoulder here is one of the most important buildings from the beginning of the building of the city. These are the gatehouses. The gatehouse. This is where the gates were brought up and brought down to control the flow of the river, how much water was coming through, and how much power they needed. And they dedicated, they sent messages back and forth how much they needed. This was the gatekeeper's house. He got paid a lot of money in gold to make sure that this was clear of ice and debris. And now, as we pull up here, we're going to see the dramatic sight of the Great Stone Dam, built 1845 to 1847. And it's never had a major repair. It's kind of hot, you know. You can see a little. There's now an automatic compressor speed at the top. No, it's right, the dam. And the reason you have a dam when you have a mill situation is you hold back the water for the times that you need to send it down to make water power. After electricity was invented or discovered, they could store the they could store it so the water now went into electric turbines and made electricity for most of the city. And there used to be wooden boards called flashboards that were put up in the spring. Iron rods went into the top of the dam, and then guys went out in a flatboard bottom boat. And they were out there all day. They had their lunches with them. And now these are rubber. It's rubber tube, and by pushing the button, they just come up and hold the water back. And the entrepreneurs that built this city had the water rights. They owned the water rights, and to this day, the Essex Company still does. They own the water rights from here to Franklin, New Hampshire, to the west of Lake Winnipesaukee. It's a very powerful thing. It's worth a lot of money. And so this is called the mill pond, and it goes all the way to the water treatment plant in Lowell. And it's generally 40 feet. You see a great view of the Central Bridge and the air mill clock tower. That was built by Billy Wood, the president of the American Woolen Company, who was in power when the strike of 1912 hit. That's named for Frederick Eyre, who made millions and millions of dollars. And one of his daughters was married to another wealthy family himself. One of her daughters was married to a guy that had named for himself in World War II, General George S. Patton. And so the Patton and the Patton and the Eyre family combined. But the other daughter was married to Billy Wood, who worked for the old man. And Billy Wood's grandson's wife gave $10,000 to build that new monument downtown. And I'm incredibly impressed with the way she gave it and what she meant by it. Her husband's dead, but he would have wanted her to do it. And Billy Wood's grandson was an Episcopal minister and he did good works. It's the experiment station. It's to test drinking water from many cities and towns in this part of the Commonwealth. Water is sent there to test. Now we're coming up to the beginning of what was the landing for years to put your individual boats in, and then there was a Depression-era public swimming pool. That's gone. But it's a beautiful park, and it has tennis courts up there. And something you might not have heard on another tour. Oh, this happens that we come on top of each other. This is where there used to be a big dock here, and there was a sad event that happened at the turn of the century. Boys were out on the dock, and the dock gave way, and there was multiple deaths from it. Also, back there, I don't know why they destroyed it. Over your left shoulder, you can see a rescue kiosk. It's got a fire box right there. There were, oh shoot, I'm forgetting how many children, but it was on the 14th of December, 2003, that I think it was four boys drowned on the other side of the river. One went in, ran out on the ice, it cracked, he went under, and the other three boys went to try to help him, right? And the community, well, they were like besides themselves. They were Spanish boys, but it didn't matter what nationality they were. The city mourned their deaths because it was horrific to think of their families, what they had to deal with. There's a hill up there that you can't see. It used to be called Riley. This was Riley Park. But also when we were growing up, in the 60s, it was called Bums Hill. And on that hill, Robert and Eleanor Frost used to visit with each other in intimate ways. Yes. They didn't have motor car. What they had was a rowboat. Yeah, they were canoodling. They had a secret private ceremony to marry each other when they were 16 and 16 and a half. And they also Robert would write poems just to impress her, and he eventually put 7 of those poems into a book called Twilight.
So they had no one to pass it down to. The chefs opened up a place in Salem, New Hampshire, have since moved to Haverhill on the third line on 110 called Jocelyn's or Michael's. Jocelyn's is in Salem, New Hampshire, but they're the chefs from Bishop, so the food is the same. This is the boat dock. This is the public boat dock. Boating has been revived in Lawrence. Even swimming in the Merrimack River, I wouldn't advise it. But when I was young, when some of you guys were young, you could walk across the Merrimack River. It was so polluted and so full of everything. It was disgusting. But the Clean Waters Act in the 1970s, Merrimack River has really experienced a rejuvenation, and it's wonderful. Wasn't it good?
Yeah.
Well,
Couple
it's
of
a
little
hot day.
kids.
I'm trying to think of other things that I could just shoot the breeze with before we go to. Oh, no, you can stop.
Crew house down there.
This is the neighborhood where Thelma Todd supposedly lived. Thelma Todd was an early Hollywood superstar in silent movies and early transition into talk movies. She died mysteriously in her automobile, died from monoxide poisoning. Thelma Todd. This is also a place where it's rumored that Robert Frost proposed to his girlfriend, Eleanor. Now, if you don't come from Lawrence, please understand that Robert Frost comes from Lawrence. This note that the Immigrant City Archives gave me said that make sure you say Robert Frost doesn't come from Lawrence, he comes from California. He was born in California. He comes from Lawrence. He moved here when he was 9.5 years old, attended Lawrence High School, played football for Lawrence High School. He was a Lancer. They weren't Lancers back then. He was the editor of the Bulletin, the school newspaper. His first published poems were in Lawrence High School. He taught at Lawrence High School for a little while. Robert Frost, you all know, stopping by the woods on a snowy evening. Whose woods these are? I think I know. His house is in the village, though. One of my other favorite poems is The Road Not Taken. Whose woods? No. 2 woods diverged in the wood, and I, be but one travel along, I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the end of the path. Then took the other there, perhaps wanting where, and it goes on. And then he says, I shall be telling this with a sigh. Ages and ages hence, 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. And then I wonder, was he happy or was he sad? What do you think?
And he had two books, only two editions, and two copies printed. And one of them he ripped up after Eleanor refused to accept it from him because he'd gone to her college, St. Lawrence College in Canton, New York. And he'd gone up there to see her without announcing that he was coming. He had come to see her because his mother-in-law said, "You better watch out. She's falling in love with that Reverend's son." And there was a college for Unitarians at the time, which her father was a Unitarian minister. So he went up there to make sure that his claim that he had staked, he still had. And she said, "Robert Ross, go home. I don't want you here. You can't come here. Go." She slammed the door in his face. So he was very dramatic. He walked back to the town center along the railroad tracks, hoping a train would come and run him over. And he ripped up his copy of the book. So that copy that Eleanor kept with a dedication in his hand is the most expensive Robert Frost book that you could possibly have. The dedication page was ripped out by Robert Frost after Eleanor's death. But he did allow a man to purchase it from him for a big amount of money in the 50s. And it sits in a large collection of Frost memorabilia at the University of Virginia, which he was very close to. And his granddaughter, Leslie B. Francis, went to school there and taught. We're going to the voting site now. A group of Laurentians who were brought up here, and people were made and moved away. They're still Laurentians. Wherever you go after your hometown, you're still part of that hometown. Our Latin neighbors were coming from little towns, especially in Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico. At their festival time for the Latino festival, they will have flags with the name of their towns on it, you know, so their hearts are always there.
People talk about the skyline of New York City and the skyline of San Francisco. I have a slideshow, probably 300 slides. One of them is a picture of Lawrence from Prospect Hill. And I think I found 19 smokestacks. And it's just as important as the skyline of New York City. Maybe all the money is in New York City. But in those mills with the smokestacks and smoke spewing out of those smokestacks will produce the uniforms for the soldiers in the Civil War, in the Spanish-American War, in World War I, and World War II. Our skyline was equally as important as any skyline in America. This is the boathouse, owned by and operated by the Heritage State Park. They have a boating program, Lawrence boating program. They have kayaks, sailboats, sculls. It's kind of neat in the middle of this industrial complex to have a beautiful, beautiful boathouse with all those boats, and it's free, and you can
have fun.
And you can have fun, and families can come here for a small fee and get lessons in sailing and what have you. And the Merrimack River is a bustling place. It's bustling from here in Methuen, up in Lowell, the Crescent Yacht Club down in Haverhill, and obviously in Amesbury and Newburyport. It's kind of neat, and it's neat that Lawrence is part of that piece as well.
This boathouse is named after Abe Bashara, who was one of the principal owners of a restaurant called Fisher's. And he took this on as his major charity with his brothers, and so they named this after him. This is the Tommy Lane Landing, and Thomas J. Lane was our congressman. He was such a good guy and so beloved. He was re-elected twice while he was in jail for tax evasion. And my brothers, well, our whole family, have Tommy Lane to thank. Well, there's the kiosk with all the stuff that's made to help rescue. There's there's like the inner tube.
Remember we saw that track last building.
Life ring, thank you. And there's rope, and there's all the things that you might need. the fire, setting up the firebox, you'll get the fire engine and the rescue crew to come here right away. So Tommy Lane helped our grandfather, Joseph Roberts Jr., who was injured with mustard gas. And the government was treating mustard gas illness just like they treated Agent Orange. Nothing happened, you're fine. You know, so Tommy Lane fought for the GIs from World War I who were suffering from their lungs were corroding.
Lawrence is 7 square miles. It's tiny, tiny, tiny. And a zillion streets, and 15 different schools, and a gazillion different churches, and a gazillion different convents and firehouses. And my point is, 7 square miles of taxable property isn't 7 square miles of taxable property. You don't tax the streets or the fire stations or the police stations or the schools or the churches. You don't tax the Merrimack River, which is probably 1 square mile in and of itself. So Lawrence's biggest problem is space. People move out of districts in Lower or Havel, but they live in Havel or Lower. They stay there. People move out of Lawrence. There is no out of Lawrence in Lawrence because it's so small. But that's the way it's always been. Immigrant groups come to Lawrence. They settle in Lawrence where there's ethnic connections, ethnic churches, ethnic social clubs, ethnic celebrations, and they're comfortable here. And then they move further out. Every Italian who lives in around 110 in the valley in Methuen lived in Lawrence at one time. Most of the French Canadians in West Methuen lived in Lawrence at one time. Most of the Irish lived in North Andover, lived in North Lawrence or South Lawrence on Union Street at one time. And that's just the natural way of migration.
What's the current population?
The current population is around 75,000, 78,000 maybe. The largest ethnic population, I think, is Dominican, and then Puerto Rican, and then maybe Vietnamese. A lot of Cambodians and Portuguese up in Lowell. But every ethnic group that comes to Lawrence brings part of their culture with them. I never knew how to do the merengue and the salsa and the bachata. Those are my favorite dances now. I never heard of flan, but I like that as a dessert now.
This is Eaton Street, which was named after a very important attorney, James J. Eaton I. And so they named that street after him because he was a real estate developer. Up ahead of us is a very historic site. Although it's not, I can't call it an antique because it's less than 50 years old. But this was the second Dunkin' Donuts in Lawrence. I think 3 on the south side and 2 on the north side. America runs on Dunkin' Donuts.
The mills themselves, in the spirit of, and like Lowell, Manchester, and like Havel to a degree, experiencing rejuvenation, like the wood mill, the largest wool and worsted mill in the world. Now it's Monarch on the Merrimack, and they're building condos. The Washington Mills, that's 155 apartments on Canal Street. Those are the largest wool and worsted mill in the world. Like the largest wool and worsted mills, the wood mill. And really, with 2 parts, we're only going to see one. In the 60s, they burnt down by control because now everybody has to drive to work, so they needed parking spaces. So they burnt half the wood mill down to the ground to provide parking spaces. People, they say they have a tough time driving in Lawrence in the wintertime but the streets are all small because they weren't designed for traffic. They were designed for pedestrians. Everybody walked to work. Everybody was in walking distance of the mills. So that's why the streets are so tough.
Made a date to come back. And on that day, they had a vigorous walk. 24 hours. Daniel Saunders' house was right there, and it was an antique. This was the Londonderry and Andover Turnpike. You went from Nashua, New Hampshire, not Nashua, Londonderry, New Hampshire, down through Salem to Methuen to Andover. This was with Andover, and all the way, it took you all the way into the outskirts of Boston. This right here is the second Catholic major Irish Catholic church in the city. It was founded by the people who founded St. Mary's on the north side for Irish Catholics. From this whole section here, men and their families that came with them, that did the hard labor, the digging, and the breaking of rocks. They moved over here in the shanties. It was disgusting. They literally lived in metal shacks, like we here have seen down south in the bayous. And there was lots of sickness because of that. We're just about to come to the Great Stone Dam again. I haven't even looked at this. I know my city. I had a mother that basically, without telling me, put me in charge of remembering. And she told me great stories. And my twin brother has a tune, and I know what color the ring was that the obstetrician told me what color the ring was, or the stone was. And it was blue. Oh, are we stopping at Dunkin' Donuts? Oh, we're going back on. We're going on Merrimack Street. Now there's the South Canal that never got finished, the length of it, for a very important reason. So I'm going to slow here. Right there is the modern thing that happened with that water. That's a hydroelectric plant. It was one of the first of its kind in New England, and it could light the homes of, I think it was 30,000 homes, and they've upgraded it.
Stop right there just for 1 minute. You can see the dam over there. Right to the left of the dam is the Lawrence Hydroelectric Plant. Now, by law, dams have to create and build fish ladders for salmon to go up to spawn upriver. So salmon would come off the shore out the Atlantic Ocean, up the Merrimack River. But they couldn't jump up 32 feet. So they built a fish ladder on the south side of the dam for fish to naturally make that climb up and off to lower. But when they built the hydroelectric plant, they had to take part of the fish ladder out. By law, they had to provide opportunity for the salmon to spawn. So during spawning season, there's a gentleman who sits there in a glass, next to a glass elevator. When he sees salmon come in, presses the button, the elevator goes up, and lets the salmon out back into the Merrimack River.
The Essex Company is a subsidiary, fully owned subsidiary of Enel Power, the third largest electric power creator in the world. And at the time they were building the canal, they could now store energy, and they also had discovered a way to convert steam into energy. And right before the aerial clock tower, there was a massive power plant that burned coal, and then made electricity. So they didn't need this, which it seemed like, oh, this might have been better. They weren't thinking about the environment. They were thinking about a cheaper way to make energy.
This is the South Canal, which was built.
We were at a tour at the hydroelectric park 2 years ago, and they didn't even mention it.
The tour that we took on the canal, the
what?
engineering
How many
tour,
smokestacks the mills are
They had
powered
Okay,
by water?
because they were powered by
I
water
was
for
talking about
maybe,
that hydroelectric park. They
30
didn't even mention
years.
that they had to do
and
it.
then because of the seasons and because they just converted to coal. They converted from coal to electricity. That mill right there, the Pacific Paper Mill, was the last mill using water power. In 2005, that mill shut down. But they were still using water power. But most of the mills at that point were being powered either by electricity or coal. But they transitioned from water, but they used water for around 40 years.
Why did they get away from it? What were the drawbacks?
The coal was, I don't know, assuming it was more steady. Like, you'd have to rely on the rains. Like,
Oh,
we
I
didn't have
see.
any snow this winter, so the spring was very, and the summer was almost drought. The South Canal goes under the air mill. This was built in 1860. The North Canal was built in 1848.
What is under the smokestack? Is there some giant furnace or something?
Originally, when they were fired with coal, yeah. And they were all, I mean, when I tell you they were 1920 smokestacks. But the mill, the Washington mills, the wood mills, the air mill, they're beautiful, beautiful buildings. The architecture is spectacular. If you get a chance to walk in the Everett Mill, at the end, right at the end of Essex Street, you can walk in to see the offices of the wood mill. We talked about the air mill tower, right? It's really a beautiful tower. It's mentioned in one of Robert Frost's poems, Night Walking. And he walks out and he talks about one illuminated clock against the sky, which was the air mill clock tower.
What's happening with
Oh,
these
I'm sorry.
condos?
That's okay.
I think I'm right.
It's all right.
I had the extraordinary experience, and four of us who all graduated from Lawrence High School about the same time, we gave tours on a Friday, on a Saturday, to the Airwood and Patton family. They had a reunion. They went to Lowell first, where they made big money, and then they came here. So it was one granddaughter of Billy Wood, George Patton's son. So it was that generation who wrote that, and then great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren. Our grandmother was the sole support of her family. She's not that important in the sense of the whole story of Lawrence, but she's a great example of the hard work of anyone who came here to make a better life. She was the sole support of her family. Her mother and father had died. She had two younger brothers, and my grandmother had double mastectomy for breast cancer. And by the time she was 17, she was the sole support. Wow. I don't want to do that.
What's happening with these condos? Are they progressing or?
They're progressing slowly. What's progressing more is the Pacific Mills. This was the wood mill. And at the other end of the wood mill was the Pacific Print Works. And that's what Sal Lupo bought, Napoleon bought. And that's going gangbusters. That's the new train station right there, the McGovern train station. But the Pacific Print Works is almost at 100% capacity. And so the more people that are working, the more people will be buying lofts in the wood mill.
Because of the way they're situated, so each one gets morning and afternoon sun. And they were designed by an architect named James Allen, who just happens to be the uncle of our family undertaker. And I'll tell you more after we cross the other ones. They're now selling them as condos. And I think there must be federal money that you can apply for. He also designed these 3 tenements, and as you get up here, see if you can figure out what's very unique about them. See it yet? They're not parallel to the street. They are turns, and that's also for air and light to get in there. Revolutionary idea. It took up a little more space, but Billy Wood let him do it. These are infill houses built by Habitat for Humanity. There was a massive fire here about 5 years ago, I think it was, that started right in this vacant lot.
That's the plan.
How did you get to go up the tower? You said you went up the clock tower. How do you get to do that?
I don't know. The only reason I was able to go was because I was conducting that tour to the air mill, and they made arrangements because it was their mill. So I'm not sure. The air mill was really in disrepair growing up, and Tom Caffrey, an attorney and school committee member, spearheaded a drive, a fundraising drive to resurrect it, and it was really, the whole community got behind the drive because it symbolizes Lawrence, the dam and the air mill clock tower. And I like to thank the old Lawrence High School.
Were those homes before that are condos now, or?
Those are homes to service the mills,
Uh-huh.
in walking distance to the mills.
Hafner's gasoline, many of you might have used it in your lives. They're a success story connected to Billy Wood, the president of the American Wool Company. Well, Mr. Hafner, his first job was he was a barber. Mr. Wood got his hair cut in his office once a week, and his Italian barber dropped dead. And he was very angry at him. So he made his offer as one of his chauffeurs and told him to find out a barber. He said, well, I know someone. And they brought Mr. Louis Hafner. And Mr. Wood grew to like him a great deal. And he gave him stock tips. And he also gave him a business idea. He said, you know, there's this new thing called the motor car that's coming into being. And anybody that gets the concession to buy gasoline brought into Boston Harbor, they're going to do well. That's the beginning of the foundation. That's the foundation of the empire of Hafner's gas station.
My favorite Robert Frost poem is called Mending Wall. It's about rebuilding a stone wall. And in the poem he asks, good fences make good neighbors. And I'm not sure that fences make good neighbors. I used to ask my kids to say, walk home and look at the fences and see what those fences have to tell you. See what they're saying. Are they saying, welcome, come in, nice light, white, 3-foot picket fence? Or is it a stockade fence saying, get out! I don't like you. Mind your own business. And what do those fences tell you? Are the fences to keep someone out or to keep someone in, a dog or maybe a child? And I noticed that the Latinos are building fences in North Lawrence with steel, but then they're painted in pastel, the cement, they're painted in pastel. And what they're saying to me is, I'm here. And I'm bringing part of my Caribbean culture to Lawrence. And really, they're beautiful fences. And so take a look at the different fences. And if you see a stone wall, think of Robert Frost. Merrimack River really is a beautiful river. When we arrive, I'm going to read the poem by Emily Green Leatherby. Okay? And then I'll dismiss you.
The question from the young lady is, how clean is this? It's one of the cleanest rivers of its kind, but it's one of the cleanest rivers in America because where the water comes out from sewerage and industry, we have very, very good wastewater treatment plants. Lowell and Lawrence do. There's smaller ones downriver. But by the time the water gets down to April and the smaller towns along, we've pretty well cleaned it, and they don't have a lot of industry. They do have small wastewater treatment plants. So, should I speak fast? Okay. So I told you about this being the Fenton Judicial Center. If you look to your left, that's the tallest office building. That's the Bay State building, and it was built in phases. And it used to have commercial stores downstairs. I remember my older brother going to UMass Amherst, and the men's store at the bottom of Wade's, and he had to have wool socks that matched his wool sweaters. He was crazy about that. Until a couple of years later, that stuff didn't mean anything because you were wearing hippie clothes. Yeah. Well, he was just a surfer. He had striped shirts. He was just a surfer. Back there, it's not a significant building, but the central building over there is where Robert Frost and his girlfriend Eleanor Miriam White were married in December of 1895, because Robert's mother had a private school there, and she lived in the back. Not unusual for people to live in office buildings in the late 19th century.
Leonard Bernstein, I think it's kind of interesting. Leonard Bernstein was born in Lawrence. He goes on to write a Tony Award and an Academy Award score for West Side Story about the turf war between Italian gang and a Puerto Rican gang. How prophetic. Because 50 years later, when I might have been teaching alongside, there might be a fight between a Latino, New Immigrant Latino and some Italian American in the cafeteria fighting over some young lady who caught someone's eye. And that was the story of West Side Story is the story of Lawrence today. Ferdinand Damara. Anyone know who Ferdinand Damara is? Ferdinand Damara. He's called the Great Imposter. If you look at the movie Catch Me If You Can, it was based on Ferdinand Damara's life. Tony Curtis starred as Ferdinand Damara in the movie. Ferdinand Damara. All right, I'm going to read this poem quickly as I can. Fair city by the river, dear home across the sea, in the gray autumn twilight, sweet thoughts you bring to me. I see your sunny hillsides, I tread your thronging streets, I hear the rippling river that dances at your feet. But fairer than all the pictures that weave their magic spells, I hear in memory's echoes the sounds of Lawrence bells. The bells are tolled to music high up in dizzy tower. They call to duties varied or softly chime the hour. They tell of store and factory, of merchants' busy mart, the church, the school, the workshop, the railroads throbbing hot. They're rung in joy and sorrow, and many a story tell of pleasant, happy greetings, of partings and farewells. They speak of living friendships, of comrades young and old, and ne'er will be forgotten the tales that they have told. They sound far o'er the river, above the quiet hill, where sleep our friends and kindred, resting so calm and still. Sweeter than all the music I've heard in foreign climes, comes crowding on my spirit the memory of their chimes. Near from a lonely minister, or old cathedral gray, peal forth such glorious music as comes to me today. From far away, Lawrence, the fairest land I know, the haunts of happy childhood, the home of long ago. Fly swiftly on your mission, good ship across the sea, that I may hear the greetings these bells will give to me. I almost hear them saying, far o'er the ocean foam, welcome, O weary wanderer, welcome to home, sweet home. Thank you.